2:21 in the morning on August 3rd, a magnitude 4.8 earthquake struck Gao County in Yibin, Sichuan. The focal depth was 6 kilometers. 6 kilometers, that is shallow. Shallow earthquakes shake the surface harder than deep ones. The China Earthquake Administration activated a Level 4 emergency response. The United States Geological Survey recorded the same event at magnitude 5.0 at 10 kilometers deep. One earthquake, 2 agencies, 2 different numbers. It was the 4th strong quake in that one county since the end of June. And Yibin is not just any county. Yibin is where the Yangtze River officially begins. Follow that water downstream, and you arrive at the Three Gorges Dam, the largest power station ever built by human beings, holding back roughly 39 billion cubic meters of water above 4 provinces. In the 1990s, 2 of the scientists asked to approve that dam refused to sign their names. Keep that in mind, it matters later. Here is what Gao County has recorded in 5 weeks. June 29th, magnitude 5.5, 6 kilometers deep, 13 people injured. July 8th, magnitude 5.0, followed by 4 aftershocks in 10 minutes. Magnitudes 3.1, 3.0, 3.4, and 4.0 at 6:14, 6:17, 6:19, and 6:22 in the morning. July 9th, magnitude 4.8, August 3rd, magnitude 4.8 again. These are not scattered events across a large country. This is one county, in one summer, on one fault system. Those are only the events large enough to make the news. Below them sits a much larger population of small tremors that never gets reported. Because nobody feels a magnitude 1.4 at 3 in the morning. Count those. And the number for this region does not run to dozens. It runs to thousands. We will come back to that, because it turns out to be the most important number in this entire story. Yibin sits at the southern edge of what Chinese geologists call the north-south seismic belt. It also sits on the Hoang Mountain Fault Zone, which runs more than 300 kilometers through the region and controls most of the seismic activity around the city. None of this is new. Yibin has recorded destructive earthquakes for centuries. But something about the last 15 years is different, and the difference is measurable. After the August 3rd earthquake, the local report said power, communications, and transport were operating normally. No damage has been reported. So what is shaking Yibin? There is an official answer, and it is a real one. The Indian plate is still colliding with the Eurasian plate. That collision pushes the Tibetan plateau eastward. The plateau runs into the hard, stable Sichuan basin and stops. Stress builds along the edges. Eventually, rock fails. That is textbook geology. It is not propaganda, and this video is not going to pretend otherwise. But it does not explain the timing. The Sichuan Basin has been pushing against the Tibetan Plateau for millions of years. Something changed in the last 15. In 2017, a study was published in the journal Scientific Reports. It examined earthquakes in exactly this area. The conclusion was that a series of earthquakes with magnitudes up to 4.7 had been induced by hydraulic fracturing for shale gas at depths of 2.3 to 3 kilometers. Induced, not predicted, not survived, caused. Now here is the part most channels leave out. Look at who wrote that paper. The authors included the Yibin Earthquake Mitigation Administration, the Sichuan Earthquake Administration, the Chongqing Earthquake Administration, the Yunnan Earthquake Administration. They co-authored it. You will hear it said that Chinese official seismologists only ever blame plate movement. That is not accurate. Chinese government seismologists put their names on the study that blamed the drilling. The scale is worth sitting with. One temporary monitoring network in the Changning shale gas field recorded more than 15,000 earthquakes in 3 years. Another local array, running for less than 12 months in 2019, identified roughly 40,000 seismic events, 40,000 in 1 year. Around one gas field, almost all of them were far too small to feel. That is the whole point. The instruments were only there because somebody had already decided this needed watching. And once the instruments went in, they found an entire population of earthquakes nobody had known was happening. Then some of them stopped being small. On June 17, 2019, a magnitude 5.8 earthquake hit Changning County in the same city. 13 people died. More than 200 were injured. Multiple research teams have since argued that the sequence was triggered by industrial fluid injection. So how does pumping liquid into the ground create an earthquake? The mechanism is not exotic. Faults are already there, already under stress, held still by friction. Push high-pressure fluid into the rock, and you raise the pore pressure inside those faults. Raising pore pressure reduces the friction holding the two sides together. You are not creating force. You are removing the brake. That is the entire principle, and it applies to any fluid at any scale, which is why the same physics has a second name in the scientific literature. Reservoir-induced seismicity, an earthquake triggered by the construction of a reservoir and the storage of water in it. Now let me be straight with you about something, because this is where a lot of channels overreach. The 2026 Gao County earthquakes were 6 to 8 kilometers deep. The fracking injections in those studies were 2.3 to 3 kilometers deep. That is a real gap, and it is a real objection. Fluid pressure can migrate downward along pre-existing faults, and researchers have modeled exactly that. But nobody has published a finding that this specific August earthquake was caused by drilling. Not yet. Anyone who tells you otherwise is guessing. What can be said is narrower, and it is still serious. This region has a documented, peer-reviewed history of human activity setting off earthquakes, and the shaking has not stopped. And this is a region with an enormous amount of water sitting on top of it. China has more reservoirs than any country on Earth. Roughly half the world's dams are inside its borders. 6 of the 10 tallest dams ever built are Chinese. That did not happen gradually. Most of it happened inside 2 generations. During a construction campaign that pushed hydropower deep into western China, into exactly the terrain where the Tibetan Plateau is still rising, still moving east, still grinding against the basin. The same mountains that make the rivers steep enough to be worth damming are the mountains that are still moving. Ask yourself how many of those sites would clear an independent geological review today, with the seismic data we now have and did not have in 1985. When these structures fail, the water does not negotiate. It arrives all at once on the night of August 27, 1993. The Gohao Reservoir in Gonghe County, Qinghai collapsed. 325 people were killed on August 7, 2010. A mudslide buried Juku County in Gansu. 1,557 people died and 208 were never found. One contributing cause was the failure of an abandoned reservoir dam. After the recent Yibin earthquakes, local water authorities inspected the reservoirs in the area. No damage has been reported. Which brings us to the largest reservoir of them all. Every summer, when the Yangtze floods, the same claim circulates. You have probably seen a version of it. An anonymous post appears, describing what happens if the Three Gorges Dam fails. A wall of water at 100 kilometers per hour. Chongqing, Wuhan, Nanjing. 400 million people affected. Millions dead. I am not going to build a video on that number. It comes from an unsigned article. Nobody has attached their name to it. Nobody has published the model, and the figure changes depending on which version you read. Some say 132 million. Some say 400 million. When a number moves that much, the number is not the story. So put it down. Here is a figure that does not need to be anonymous. In 2010, the China Earthquake Administration published a study of seismic activity around the Three Gorges Reservoir. Between June 2003, when filling began, and the end of December 2009, monitors recorded 3,429 earthquakes in the reservoir area. Compared with the period before the dam, that is roughly a 30-fold increase in seismic frequency. 30-fold. That is not an exile blogger. That is not a leaked document. That is China's own earthquake agency, counting earthquakes around China's own dam and publishing the result. The United States Geological Survey has cited the same finding. There is a local version of that comparison that is even harder to look away from. Zigui County sits at the dam site itself. Its county records reportedly show 6 earthquakes strong enough to be felt by residents across the previous 1,000 years. 1,000 years, 6, then the reservoir filled, and the monitors started counting in the thousands. Now, almost all of those events were tiny. Most were magnitude 2 or below, too small to feel, let alone damage anything that matters, and it should be said plainly. 1,000 tremors nobody notices is not a disaster. It is a signal. The question is what the signal means. But the pattern did not stop in 2009. Seismicity in the reservoir region peaked in 2008 and 2009, and again in 2013 and 2014. The largest recorded event so far was a magnitude 5.1 near Badong in December 2013. Fan Xiao, then chief engineer of the Sichuan Regional Geological Survey team, has been one of the most persistent voices on this. After the 2014 quakes near Zigui County, he argued the reservoir area had entered its most dangerous phase. Because reservoir-induced seismicity typically appears years, sometimes a decade after a reservoir first reaches its highest level, water needs time to work its way down into the faults. And Fan Xiao is the same geologist who, after the 2008 Wenchuan earthquake, said he could not completely rule out the possibility that water storage at the nearby Zipingpu Reservoir contributed to triggering it. That claim remains contested. Several published studies support it. Several published studies reject it. The scientific argument has been running for 18 years and is not settled. But notice the shape of the disagreement. Nobody is arguing about whether reservoirs can induce earthquakes. That mechanism is established. The argument is only about how big an earthquake a reservoir can induce. 3 weeks ago, that argument stopped being theoretical. On the morning of Friday, July 17, 2026, in Pengshui County on the outer edge of Chongqing, a community worker noticed rocks falling from a cliff face above the Wujiang River. It was around 8 a.m. he raised an alarm. Authorities ordered an evacuation. More than 60 residents were told to leave immediately. Over 100 people were moved in total. The mountainside came down at 9:08 a.m. 68 minutes. Everything worked. Someone was watching. Someone reported it. Someone gave the order. People were physically walking out of their homes when it happened. The landslide carried roughly 18,000 cubic meters of rock and soil. The largest single boulder was about 3,000 cubic meters, a piece of mountain, the size of a small apartment block. It buried more than 10 residential buildings on the riverbank. The first report said 8 dead, 34 missing. By July 31st, Bloomberg reported the confirmed death toll had risen to 51, with 10 still missing. It is the deadliest landslide in China in more than a decade. Xi Jinping ordered an investigation into the cause. Reuters, the Associated Press, and CCTV all described it as rain-triggered. Wang Chuanjun, head of planning and natural resources in Pengshui County, told a press conference that field inspections had found scattered unstable rock masses still sitting at the top and along the sides of the cliff. He warned of continued collapse risk not only during heavy rain, but during long stretches of hot, dry weather as well. So the warning system detected it, the evacuation started, and 51 people still died. Ask yourself what that means for the places where nobody is watching a specific cliff face on a specific morning, because the Wujiang is a tributary of the upper Yangtze, and along the banks of the Three Gorges Reservoir itself, thousands of slopes have been cataloged as unstable. This is the part of a reservoir that people outside engineering rarely think about. A reservoir is not a still lake. Its level is raised and lowered by tens of meters every year. On a schedule to manage floods and generate power, every cycle soaks the slopes above the waterline, then drains them, then soaks them again. Rock that has been stable for 10,000 years does not necessarily stay stable through 40 of those cycles. Cracks that were dormant reopen. Slopes that were merely steep become loaded. Chinese authorities have carried out emergency reinforcement work along sections of the Yangtze inside the reservoir area, concentrated in the Kutang and Wu Gorges. And this is the quiet part of the story, the part that has nothing to do with China. If you live somewhere with aging infrastructure, you already recognize the shape of it. The inspection happened, the report was filed. The recommendation went into a queue behind 11 other recommendations. The structure is still standing, and nobody can quite tell you how much margin is left, because the margin was never a number anyone was asked to publish. Which brings us back to 2 signatures that were never given. When the Three Gorges Project was assessed before construction, not every expert on the panel approved it. Hydrologist Liu Qinkan and ecologist Ho Shuiyu declined to sign. Their objections included the geology of the reservoir walls, the concern that heavy rain and slope failure along the banks could generate enormous waves inside the reservoir. Huang Wanli, a hydraulic engineering professor at Tsinghua University, spent years opposing the project. He warned of sediment accumulation, ecological damage, and worsening floods. He died in 2001, 2 years before the reservoir began to fill. They were not proven right. Sediment management has worked better than Huang predicted. The dam generates enormous amounts of electricity, and it has held back real floods. Any honest account has to say that. But they were not proven wrong either, and they were never answered. They were simply outvoted, and the project went forward. That is the pattern worth watching. Not a wall of water, not 400 million people, something quieter. A country builds at a scale nobody has built at before. It builds fast, and it builds in the most geologically active terrain it has. The specialists raise objections. The objections are recorded, filed, and overtaken by the schedule. And then the ground begins keeping its own record. 3,429 tremors here, 15,000 there. A mountainside in Pengshui at 9:08 in the morning. None of that proves the Three Gorges Dam is about to fail. It is not about to fail. The engineers monitoring it are among the best in the world. And the monitoring network around that reservoir is one of the densest on the planet. The risk was never a single dramatic morning. The risk is that the margin between safe and unsafe gets spent one inspection at a time, by people who are each individually doing their jobs correctly. The rocks were falling in Pengshui for 68 minutes before the mountain came down. Someone saw them, someone called it in, someone ordered the evacuation, and the last official update from Yibin, after 4 earthquakes in 5 weeks 6 kilometers below one county, no damage has been reported.